struggling here, Dom. Just bear with
Over
us.
to you, Chair. Sorry.
Okay. I'm just trying to get the minutes up, Dom. I'm struggling a bit. But anyway, the agenda and everything up. Evening, everyone. Thanks.
Evening, Chair.
Thanks for attending tonight. Dom, I'm going to hand this straight over to you to go through the formalities.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Dominic Monaghan. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting. With me, I have my colleagues Stephen Mason and Lindsay Stevens from Democratic Services. We also have Andy Thomas and we have Sarah Banks. And then the councillors on this committee are Councillor Atwell, Councillor Nawaz, Councillor Testro, Councillor Pearce, Councillor Pegg, Councillor Hudson and Councillor Marshall, and Councillor Smale will be joining this call later on as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, thanks, Chair.
I don't have any late items. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of August.
Move as printed, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So it's over to Our City, Our River. I'm not sure who's
That's Sarah Banks, Chair.
Oh, Sarah, that's over to you then, Sarah. Thank you. Sarah? Hello?
Oops, sorry, yes, I was on mute there.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me along, Chair. The report that has been circulated was written by my colleague, Murray Parker, who's the technical engineer on the Our City, Our River project, and he's on leave today, so I've come along to hopefully answer your queries or take away queries for Murray to respond back to, subject to the discussion today. So my understanding is you wanted to understand how the flood defences have been assessed or monitored or would perform in a severe flood event.
Yes, please.
So in essence, what the report is setting out is that it was designed, the Our City, Our River scheme, flood alleviation and regeneration scheme, was essentially designed by the Environment Agency as the lead organisation based on their flood modelling technical understanding with consultants called Black and Veatch. Excuse me, I've got a froggy voice. There is like a technical flood model, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's sort of in a way from just my previous planning role, similar to sort of a transport model. So it's a computer program that looks at all the different, feeds in lots and lots of data and information, and then churns out potential sort of scenarios, if you like. And that flood model will do things they usually do, something like a 1 in 20 event, a 1 in 25, a 1 in 50, a 1 in 75, a 1 in 100, a 1 in 200, a 1 in 100 plus 30% for climate change, and then a 1 in 1,000. So the Our City, Our River scheme is designed to what is would be classed as a 1 in 100 year in-year event with a 5% allowance for climate change. And that was seen as the standard at the time for flood defence measures, which is, I mean, it has changed now. The allowance for climate change has gone up to 30%, but we're actually sort of mid-delivery of the scheme. One of the key things to perhaps for me to point out is that one of the reasons behind the Our City, Our River scheme going ahead was that there were quite a number of properties that were protected by ageing flood defences. So defences that had gone in sort of the 50s and 60s after the last large-scale flood event. So they were coming to the end of their 50-year lifetime. And also were providing what was either a 1 in 20 or 1 in 25, very occasionally a 1 in 50 level of flood defence defence protection, which insurance companies don't see as adequate. And so certainly in the Chester Green area, some of the residents were starting to see quite high insurance premiums being quoted because of their flood risk. So the 1 in 100 level of flood protection plus the 5% for climate change does also, as it sets out in Murray's report, also includes a thing we call freeboard, which is another, quite a few centimetres higher allowance in that as well for tolerance. But actually sort of future-proofs all the current residents within these properties, certainly, like I say, for example, in the Package 1 area at Chester Green, for being able to get affordable flood resilience insurance, property insurance for their homes. So in essence, that's sort of the level of protection. With regards to a severe event, we can't mitigate against every scenario, and I think it would be one, we've had discussions about whether or not we would need to go back to the Environment Agency, back into planning, and have a look at maybe designing the flood defences to be higher to this 1 in 100 plus 30% allowance for climate change. But actually we're starting to get into some really high significant flood walls or defences there in some residential areas. Certainly within Chester Green you'd probably be looking at another ½ a metre of flood wall to be added, height to the flood wall, and it's looking at sort of the probability of actual risk of those properties actually flooding. So there's sort of been, if you like, a balance of that. The flood structures themselves, did you want me to go into a little bit of detail about how the flood walls are being constructed?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think so.
So if you, and I'll talk about Package 1 because that's the bit that we've completed, but in essence, the majority of the flood defences that go upwards of the council house go down up to 9 metres deep below ground as well. So if it's a flood wall that's nearly 3 metres high above, it's likely that it goes down 9 metres below ground, and we've provided there what we call a level of seepage cut-off. And that's because the old flood defences still had fairly adequate foundations, but what we were finding, certainly within the functional floodplain where we have got properties, that water would be seeping underneath the flood defences, would then be floodwaters would come up into properties through their sinks, the downstairs toilets, the drains would, and that kind of thing. So actually we've also tried to create and minimise the risk of that happening. So for the sort of just over, it's about 3 kilometres, isn't it, 2.8 kilometres of length going upstream from the council house to where we finish, we've actually, if you like, created this big flood sort of bowl down to quite a significant depth that should also mitigate the level of flood risk from seepage as well as just surface water. And then the flood walls themselves, the active flood defence is the sheet piled core, which in some places is still visible to the rear of the Ada Bliss site. That's still visible at the moment. And then the rest of the properties, they've been clad with more often than not a concrete sort of facing, and then they've had a brick sort of dressing put on the outside. So the actual physical above ground structure is about 60 centimetres deep as well, and then where we put structural glazing, that's triple glazing, if you like. So the actual active flood defence is the central piece of glass, and then you've got almost like 2 sacrificial layers either side should anything significant hit those, which it could be boats or anything else, big trees or whatever that's been caught up in the flood events. The design life is a minimum of 50 years, ideally 100. The foundations are such that should climate change and I suppose events evolve, that actually if we wanted to go back in 50 or 100 years time to top up these defences, that we could take the top layer, if you like, down, and the foundations are such that we could build higher defences on top and not have to start all over again. The sort of active defences, so the floodgates, they have a design life of 25 years for things like seals, the mechanisms and gears or whatever, but in essence they are all designed to provide the city with a level of protection which exceeds the current minimum for reasonable insurance, and also should future-proof the city for, like we say, at least 50 to 100 years to come with the foreseen climate change. Is that the sort of thing you wanted to know?
I think so, because it was on the agenda last year, and it never got raised. And I was asked if I could bring it back to the scrutiny board. I don't know if any of the fellow councillors on the committee have got anything they want to ask or anything.
Yeah, I've got a question, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Yes,
Hi,
please.
Sarah. Thanks for the update. I'm really interested to hear. Firstly, how well equipped are we this year, coming on from last year, obviously with the devastating rainfall we had, and practically a near miss of where we were. I mean, how far have we moved on from last year with everything in place now?
So where we are now, so we've completed, so the Outbreak River scheme is designed, if you like, in 3 flood cells. So package 1, which protected the most number of residential properties, then package 2, which is predominantly the city centre and the second highest number of residential properties, and then package 3, which a lot of that is actually mitigation for the works that we want to do upstream. So package 1 is now complete and declared complete with the Environment Agency. So that's just over about 1,100 properties, some of which are businesses, have an enhanced level of protection. What happened in the November, say the November event, we were mid-construction. So we were mid-construction around the council house, the Riverside Gardens, we were doing the flood works there, and the Exeter Bridge, floodgate was in, and also to the rear of the Full Street Magistrates Court. When we are constructing flood defences, so in the current situation, if you like, the Environment Agency are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of all the flood resilience measures along the Derwent. When we are going in to build new flood defences, the contractor who is building those flood defences becomes responsible for those flood defences while they are undertaking that construction. So while their contract is live and until we have contractual completion, they are responsible for the flood defence for the city. Once that's completed, it's then handed over now in this new arrangement to Derby City to look after, maintain and operate. But it's very much in partnership with all of the emergency services and still very much with the Environment Agency, because Derby City, I think there's this Section 19 report that's been published recently, it covers the whole of the county. It's not just an isolated bit of the river that's sort of looked after. So in the November flood, there was an awful lot of work actually put in with the construction company. So it was NMCN actually that were responsible at the time. They were doing some works around the Ada Bliss site and along City Road, and they were also doing some works, like we say, to the rear of the council house and also behind Full Street Magistrates Court. And they put a lot of clay and material and, under agreement with the Environment Agency, temporary structures. So they did hold up. There was some seepage, but even with the new flood defences that we've built, we're not going to be able to stop or water it. It's not going to be dry, but what we are going to be doing is just, making it much, much safer. So going forward, we've now completed package 1. All of the works that we have, if you like, currently funded and on the capital programme, because of course still got a big funding gap, are what we call everything we can do, if you like, we've cherry picked from the scheme that we can complete with the money that we've got that doesn't increase flood risk anywhere else that we're doing. So it's in essence everything, if you like, to the council house side of the Derwent. So what we've called Project Munio, because we've got some funding from Europe, that's now more or less complete. So that's, like I say, I've talked about the council house, Riverside Gardens, all of that. There's been some works done along the Riverside Walk from Five Arches Bridge near the railway station through Pride Park. So if you go along there up to, I think it's Derwent Parade Bridge that goes over near Pride Park Stadium.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so that's had some works done. So that's now got an enhanced level of flood protection. And then we're just in the stages now of drafting all of the documents to go out to tender for a new pumping station to go on the Mill Fleam on Bass's Wreck. And what that will do is, if the river is high, then Markeaton Brook gets very high, doesn't it, in high rainfall, because it doesn't ever rain just into the river, it rains in other places. There's a risk to the city that Markeaton Brook won't be able to discharge into the Derwent, so it will back up and we will have a flood problem again in the city. So that's another priority for us to get that done, and we've got funding to do that. So we're on programme to get that delivered sort of in the next 2 years. So there'll be the pumping station, and what that will do is, as the Millfleam Brook, Markeaton Brook rises in the Millfleam at Bass's Wreck, if it gets too high, the pump will pump it, if you like, over the top of the flood walls and into the river. So that will help the city centre. Beyond that, we haven't got sufficient funding to do the next big piece of work, which is what we've tagged as Derby Riverside, and that's the flood defences that will go on the side of the river where Exeter House is, Stewart Street, Phoenix Street there, and the flood route that protects is massive from the infrastructure perspective of the city centre, so it's got to be our next priority. So whereas it flooded along the Pentagon and it flooded along Chequers Road, there was an issue with, I think it was surface water drainage in Severn Trent, which I know they're looking at for the Derwent Parade outfall, because there was standing water after the river had gone down there. They're addressing that. But with regards to the Pentagon and everything like that, that still isn't unprotected. It's not got its enhanced level of flood protection. It still is. So if we had another event like we had last November, the city centre, if you like, on the west bank, as we call it, the council house side, is protected. If we get the Mill Fleam pumping station in, there's a high level of resilience, but the flow route, it's in essence, it's the underpasses of the ring roads that are the flow route for the Derwent, and that will go across the Pentagon and down that. And at some point, I can't actually ever get it to work over the VPN, but we've got quite a nice animation that shows you the flow routes. So to wider protect the city's infrastructure, we need to be doing the Derby Riverside. So currently we estimate that is between a 10 and 16 million pound funding shortfall, which when OCOR started we got a nearly 60 million pound shortfall, so that's not too frightening if you like to move on to the next stage. And at the February meeting of Cabinet, we did an update report and set out, if you like, our next sort of 2 to 3 year work programme, which is to submit now full planning for the alignment of the flood defences on Derby Riverside. We have outline planning. The outline planning that we have was the scheme, if you like, we inherited from the Environment Agency. Not that we were against it, but actually as a council we believe we can do a lot better, and so we need to go back in for full planning anyway, but with a new slightly revised scheme, and that we anticipate will probably take us a year to 18 months, because we still are proposing to demolish Exeter Place, which is 42 homes, and the new alignment, we actually want to bring the flood defence nearer to the river rather than set it back, which means that we will be looking to demolish, and this is not a secret at the moment, but looking to demolish the 3 offices on Stewart Street that back onto the river currently and create a city park there. And we are not anticipating a smooth ride for that kind of, it's, you know, this is big impact for the city centre. We've got to demonstrate flood resilience, flood benefit, and also cost, you know, all of that kind of thing. So we are better protected than we were 5 years ago. If we hadn't have built the new flood defences, we would have overtopped. So Chester Green, there would have been some homes flooded definitely in Chester Green. Those properties would not have been protected as they were. So in essence, it was almost like from the team, it's like, yes, it's working, it worked. Going forward, like I said, we've got the floodgate on Exeter Place, we've got the Full Street Magistrates Court. There's still a little bit of work to do around the One Cathedral Green area, but that you know, these are, from the OCOR's perspective, not huge things to overcome. All the flood resilience on the West Bank will be done right the way down to just the top end of Ulverston Park, and then the next priority really is to get Derby Riverside done. But with regards to operational things, OCOR itself is just the delivery arm, but I think the November event was a very useful learning curve for everybody, if you like, because it was a real good test run for the city to see where potentially we need to be just aware of how quickly, I think, from my perspective, I mean, I've been working on the project 7 years nearly, but how quickly the River Derwent can rise, actually, and how we need to just be ready. So sorry, I can talk for England on this.
No, that's fine. You've answered my question, so much appreciated. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Where are we going to be looking for the 10 to 16 million pounds from?
We're still obviously in partnership with the Environment Agency, and we've done an awful lot of lobbying since the project started. And in essence, the reason why Derby is unique is the fact that under the Environment Agency's funding calculator, how their partnership funding things work, OCOR itself wouldn't hit the right score, if you like, to be funded. It would be an undeliverable scheme, too expensive, and therefore we would get nothing. What then happened was, with the City Council, there's certain sites that we've taken out, if you like, of the the part of Oakor and call those the development sites. So that's a site like the Ada Bliss site, like the Prime site on City Road, like River Lights, all of that, where flood defences are to be delivered, but ideally by a third party. And therefore, by taking that chunk of flood defences out of the ratio, if you like, the calculations, it made Oakor all of a sudden deliverable, if you like, on the partnership funding calculator. So we received the first tranche of funding from the Environment Agency in DEFRA, which was about 36 million. And since then, we've pulled in another 5 million from Europe and another 12 million from the LEP. So we're going as fast as we can, if you like, as well, to pull in the rest of the money. Earlier this year, and during lockdown, the government made a call for what they called, the oven-ready, shovel-ready projects, for something that could be delivered, a capital project, to the Environment Agency within 2 years. And the Environment Agency, on our behalf, and we had sort of quick discussions with them, could we spend any money, capital money, in the next 2 years? And of course, we've got planned a lot of work for the planning application, flood defence, we've got archaeology to do, we've got the mill fleam, that kind of thing. So we said we'd probably want to spend about 2.2 million we think we could expedite legitimately in the next 2 years. And so the recent announcement for the grants that have come out from government included a grant to Derby for 10 million, even though we asked for 2. And the understanding on that is it's a push to the City Council as well, again, to make sure we do deliver package 2 and get the flood defence done. But the messages are that we're almost knocking on an open door now. So I know that there has been moves by the leader and by the chief exec to try and talk to central government for us to actually see what further funding we could pull in, because of the schemes that have got the original tranches of funding from the Environment Agency in DEFRA. Derby's still the only one that's not fully funded. The other cities that have received all their funding have made a contribution themselves from their own budgets towards that, which Derby City hasn't done, if you like, a cash contribution in capital costs. But we have taken on the maintenance and operation, which other cities haven't done. So there is still a recognisable commitment and cash contribution from Derby City. It's just come in a different form than straightforward capital funding. The original cost forecast for the Environment Agency for the package 1 pieces of work were that it would come in at about 36 million, and it's going to come in at about 30. So we've actually demonstrated that we are delivering efficiently and within budget. So we are seen by them as actually also leading the way on doing successful delivery for a project and managing costs very well. So this 10 million that we've got, which panicked the team, to be honest, when we heard we got it, because there is no way we could deliver £10 million worth of expenditure on the flood defences in 2 years. But it's actually part of an allocation for their next spending programme for the Environment Agency. So we've still got to spend the 2 million by 2022, but actually the remaining 8 million we have now until 2027 to spend, and we think we can probably start to pull together, like I say, a convincing package of works. The next big gateway or milestone is to get full planning consent for Derby Riverside, and I think once we do that, that helps with the discussions, like you say, always with the LEP. You become absolutely a totally shovel ready, oven ready, whatever project, aren't you? Once you've got planning and a big chunk of money there, that will really help the scheme. But apart from that, nowhere else at the moment, because we're not going to go to Europe again or whatever. And we're still talking with landowners and developers. There's still an aspiration that we will get some of the flood defences delivered via integration into the new developments. There won't be standalone flood walls.
Okay. You talked about the 3 office blocks being demolished, or
yes,
whatever the case may be. Is the money to buy those offices, is it incorporated in this, or is this?
Yes.
Is that going? Oh, so that is actually incorporated.
So as part of what we did, so the original business case costings were based on the master plan for Oakor, and then we went through the big sort of hybrid planning application in 2015, and there were some changes made. So already the costings, if you like, became superseded by what we were actually going to get planning to deliver. And so we've been working with our CADIS, or our cost consultants, and they've been with us since 2015. So as we're moving forward through the scheme, because we've got an enormous workbook spreadsheet, each site has its own calculations, and what we've done for the Derby Riverside is we've revisited it from what was the original costing in the business case, which still didn't reflect what we've got planning for, and then actually had a look at what we think we need to now is the budget to deliver. And we do work with it's this huge risk pot, if you like, that the environment, we've inherited it because it's part of the Environment Agency's business case formula, so we use a Monte Carlo risk, and that's why we say it could be between 10 and 16 million, because the 6 million is just something that maybe worst case scenario that we build in there. Sorry, I've almost forgot where we were going with the question there, because oh yeah, so does it include that? Sorry, yes. So the figure that we quote includes purchase of the buildings, relocation of those businesses, and the same for Exeter Place, the 42 properties. So some of those properties currently are in, if you like, leasehold. They've done right to buy, and the rest of them are tenants. But again, it would be finding suitable alternative location, and that under the Water Resources Act as well, which is how we're delivering. We're not delivering under the Planning Act or regeneration at the moment. Disturbance and stuff, people can claim compensation under that, and we're obviously working through that process with people in the package 1 area as well. But yeah, so it's the full works, if you like. We've tried to take into account everything, and there are other properties affected. So Compton House, which is the NatWest Bank, that's down to be demolished. So again, there's 2 elements of the banking business there to be relocated, and also Derbyshire Housing and Advice, that building there is also affected, which also houses a solicitor. So we're in discussion with all of those groups. With planning, we could potentially go down a CPO route, which is something that we got cabinet approval in principle to pursue with that. However, one of the buildings on Stewart Street is the probation service, so that's owned by Crown Estates, and you can't CPO Crown Estates. But discussions that we had at quite high level, they are working with us, providing we can find suitable alternative accommodation for that. But at the moment, we're just trying to get planning and pull together the strategy for the funding package.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I think a very, very comprehensive report. I don't know if any of my fellow councillors have got anything they want to ask, or...
Can I chime in, please, Chair?
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, like the Chair said, this came to a previous meeting, and there was a question asked at that meeting, which the answer wasn't actually known at the time, about what happened last November. Do we know at this point what in-year event that actually was? So the Section 19 report, which has just been published by the county, and I believe it's on the county's website, but I mean, I have got a copy. I can email that certainly to Dominic if you like. Says that it was classed as a 1 in 20, so a 1 in 20 year event. Our understanding was we thought it was expected to be a bit higher than that, but the flood defence has certainly held up to that, but that's the official report done by the local flood authority. So any time that's them undertaking their duty. So that does talk about that, and then obviously there's all sorts of things that talked about the timeline and what was known in the days prior to that. But yes, so that's the Section 19 report has been done by the county. So that was a 1 in 20. So we are building defences for a 1 in 100. So I mean, it's a much higher flood event. The flood defences are being constructed too. Thank you.
Does that help, Richard?
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for anyone? Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for that.
No, you're very welcome.
I just got one recommendation, really, from myself, unless anybody else got any further recommendations, is that if you can keep us informed of the financial situation with regards to this, and how you're progressing with the compulsory purchases, if you like, for want of a better term, of the products. That would be really interesting for us to keep a watchful eye on. Yeah, so the best thing for me I can provide Dominic with some information of how things are moving forward. The next sort of key gateways and things, absolutely, that'd be absolutely fine. We can do that, no problem. All right. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. No, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. That's great.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye. Right, everybody, thank you for that. I thought that was very enlightening. Learned quite a bit in that myself tonight. Anyway, moving on. It's now we go to it's Andy Thomas for Public Protection.
Hello.
Are you there, Andy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, mate, can you give us the updates, please?
Yeah, there's a presentation that we've pulled together, Dom. I don't know if you can put that up.
Yep, I'll just get it up now, Andy. Thanks.
I don't know how these things work. Don't you laugh.
They don't put buttons on fact packets, do they?
Fives. Rude.
Yep, we've got that up now, Andy. Thanks.
Right. Okay. Can people see that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. After you invited me last time, three weeks ago, as we were sort of a week into that sort of change in management and structures, we said we'd come back and perhaps look at a bit more of the detail and more of a thorough presentation in terms of where we are. So I'll go through it. This a little bit of background stuff around COVID, some numbers in there around work and something around future direction. So as we just for the purposes of background, we introduced a service in 2017 primarily to tackle inner city environmental crime, and there were some really good strides made in that. Not long after that, we extended the work and the remit into the city centre, in terms of visibility, in terms of antisocial behaviour and public confidence. There was then in 19 that further investment to develop and expand this service, and I suppose that focus around safer, stronger and cleaner communities, I suppose, and that's the context and some of the background. What's emerged out of that? Those key priorities around antisocial behaviour, environmental crime, problem parking that we'll come on to in a moment. That whole visibility and reassurance, and that, I think it's easy to underestimate the influence and the importance of this role. Certainly in terms of, the uniform, the front facing, for so many people who deal with us as an organisation, either in the council house or online. These are people who are, like our civil enforcement officers, walking about, engaging, talking to people. And I don't think we can underestimate the importance of, that role and service, but also making sure we get that right, because for a lot of people, it'll be one of the few contacts that they have with us as an organisation. Linked to that, the eyes and ears for the council and partners. That's been certainly during COVID, during the lockdown, and increasingly now. That's really, really important. And what we should come on to this in a bit, but we're starting to see lots of other council areas and services wanting to use that eyes and ears for all sorts of reasons, and I've been in the last few weeks having conversations with children's services about some of the problem locations they've got, obviously Derby Homes, parks. So we're really starting to extend that remit in terms of what their function is and the impact they can have. And let's remember what that approach is. As a uniform, front-facing presence, we engage, we educate, we enforce. They're our priorities. That's the sort of the mantra that I've wanted to introduce. And of course, not necessarily in that order. So, the last couple of days we've come across some quite serious fly tipping. Well, we don't engage and educate. We investigate, we find out who's done it if we can, and we issue notices and enforce. So that's a mantra, but it's not necessarily in that order to reassure you. And what they've been doing is the evidence is that very broad and diverse range of work. We have to be careful that they don't become too stretched and trying to deliver everything to everybody and aren't focused enough and don't have enough of an impact. That I think we've focused around that ASB and environmental crime. We've got much more into problem solving. So that's working with the police, safety and neighbourhood teams and other partners. So it's not about being a one-trick pony, issuing tickets. It's about, okay, is there a wider problem? Is there a wider issue that the PPOs can contribute in terms of their role? Abandoned vehicles, fires, community engagement. As I mentioned before, city centre disorder and ASB, absolutely crucial as a priority for ensure that our city centre is safe. And again, its reputation is maintained, crucial as we move forward. Focusing around problem locations, and that key thing for me around vulnerable people and communities. We perhaps don't see that police presence as much as we used to, visibly. That's the reality of life. But the PPOs can put some of that back into our communities, being that visible and reassurance. And certainly during the COVID period, did a lot of work with vulnerable people, and probably going to restart that work as we potentially move into a further spike and the R rate goes up. So I'll talk to you a little bit around service activity. So these are our most up-to-date numbers. Let's remember that between lockdown and up until really a month ago, we weren't doing an awful lot of enforcement because we were focused around COVID, educating, engaging around social distancing. So these numbers we could probably double on a year's in terms of the year. But you've got fly tipping, 220 fixed penalty notices, litter towards the 400, dog fouling. We've had I think last week when I looked at the numbers, I think we had 3 or 4. So there's been some significant increase there. Graffiti and antisocial behaviour. So I think good levels of enforcement there. But that's not all it is, as we've mentioned. We engage in education. I think that sort of speaks for itself, that slide. The third point I'll emphasise, I think it's really important that the PPOs build those local links. I don't think they did enough at the time they were introduced. The services I run in terms of the neighbourhood teams and community safety and all that stuff, it's absolutely crucial that we develop those local links and local relationships and people get to know their patch, get to know their community, and that's really, really important for me and important for the team as well. And as I mentioned before, integrating that role into other areas of business, it's not cheap. Any new service is expensive. Let's get full value for money out of that, and let's make sure that across the board as an organisation we're utilising that resource. So I've mentioned it before, but I'll talk about the COVID-19 response. I think that's something incredibly positive, and I'm really proud of those guys because they really went above and beyond. Got themselves into some difficult situations, with businesses and district centres and the city centre. But you know what? Really proud of that front-facing role as the council, as an organisation. So, key element of our response during COVID, increasingly now as we've gone down to the 6 and out rule as of today, in terms of problem locations, parks, public open spaces. Another focus, can't enforce on that COVID legislation, only the police can do that, but we have a crucial role around engaging and educating and advising people. So again, that'll be a key priority in the city centre and working with businesses. I think what we did was a lot of safe and well checks. So we got those lists from the NHS to the council, people who were very vulnerable, and the PPOs did.
Do apologise, that's my other phone.
And the PPOs did hundreds and hundreds of safe and well checks to some of our most vulnerable people. And I don't think you can underestimate the reassurance during lockdown. Very isolated people, getting a knock on the door, here's your prescription, here's your food parcel, everything okay. Absolutely brilliant with that. Food distribution prescriptions are involved with protecting vulnerable people, as I've talked about. So a really good response, and I think in reality, I think a lot of us get the sense that we're probably going to go back to something similar, if not the same over the next few weeks and months. So PPOs have played. I don't know what we'd have done without them during lockdown. the work was fantastic. So the current position, all with a caveat of what's going to happen in terms of, you know, the community and COVID, we've started to refocus the service against those pre-COVID priorities that I talked about at the beginning. Still continuing some of that COVID-related work, as I've talked about, in context of a second spike. What we've been able to do over this last 3 or 4 weeks is give greater direction and support for the officers. I think the service was languishing a little bit. Certainly, it was great in COVID because we had a clear focus and that was straightforward. We've needed to get it back on track, and we've had, you know, I'll be honest, we've had some issues with some members of staff. We've had to lose some, and we're in the process of recruiting where there's those 2 or 3 gaps. We've improved the framework for partnership tasking. That's really, really important. Working with the police, working with Derby Homes, working with partners. So we're focusing on the right locations, on the right people, the right problems, rather than just expecting people to go out and have a wander. Well, that's not a good use of resources. We're improving the way we record and we collect data, so we'll be able to give information back, certainly at a ward level, in terms of referrals, actions and activity. And I think a crucial thing for the staff, we're put a range of training in and practical processes around a range of things: crime disorder, antisocial behaviour. So really training the staff up into making them experts, I suppose, not just in the broad PPO role, but I want to encourage them in terms of the professional development to say, you know what, I'm really interested in antisocial behaviour. Well, let's get these people trained up. Let's get them to become experts. And that's good for their motivation and development. So in terms of future direction, we're in a bit of a review of the structures, the direction of travel, not quite sure yet. The key priority for me is to make sure we've got as many PPOs on the front line, and we'll be reviewing the back office function and the management function as part of that. As I said before, greater integration with DCC services and partners. I think something I'm interested in as well and concerned about is making sure we've got that balance right between local needs, neighbourhood needs, and what those big city-wide issues are. We need to make sure we get that balance right. There's a commitment from the administration, a very clear commitment around existing resources, and a commitment that 17 PPOs working across 17 wards. And again, that mantra of mine: we engage, we educate, we enforce. That's that in very simple terms is what those guys are doing. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour really of where we are. So yeah, Chair, that's my presentation.
That standing, let's get it all back on. Let's have a look here. That's better. With regards to the fines, can you tell me what's actually outstanding and what's being done to chase those up?
Yeah, they're our normal processes, Paul. In terms of payment of fixed penalty notices, we have that back office function with legal. And we chase. I mean, I've got the numbers. I didn't put them in the presentation. I've got the numbers of percentages on each one of those areas that have been paid. But I think with a lot of this work, we have to acknowledge that there'll be a fair amount of non-payment, particularly given some of the individuals that we need to work with. You know, there's a sort of an irony really there. If we're picking on what you might call relatively decent law-abiding people, they're going to pay fines, aren't they? The ones who don't give a monkeys about going to prison or upsetting people or upsetting neighbours are highly unlikely to pay a fine. So we're always left with that quandary. But yeah, I can provide those numbers to Dom to put into the minutes.
If you would, please, I would appreciate that. Ajay, you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Andy. Just a couple of quick questions going on from the meeting we had. How many numbers in total are there now? What we got? Is it 17 PPOs, as you say? We thought citywide.
Yeah, that's what we've got allocated, and I think we've got 2, or after last week, I think we've got 3 vacancies to recruit to.
Okay, I mean, are we looking at recruiting as a matter of urgency, or we just?
Yeah, absolutely. We're ready to push the button on that. Jordan, who you'll know, who's the senior PPO. He's been off with he's had an operation on his shoulder. But given the fact that he did the previous recruitment, or was part of the previous recruitment, I've just waited a week for him to come back, so Jordan can lead on that while he's on light duties, rather than me and Sharon try and fumble our way through.
Okay, and secondly, regarding the issue where we had 1 or 2 members that were suspended, where are we with that? Have we managed to get that sorted out through HR, or are we still paying them wages?
No, we've got the team leader post is still suspended, subject to HR process, and but everybody else, we had a resignation last week. Somebody got another job. In fact, we've had a couple. Yeah, there's no outstanding HR. And I think what was interesting, I think there was a period 4, 5, 6 weeks ago where we were getting a lot of noise and issues amongst the team, and I think because it was not been managed with enough focus. And I spoke to a union rep one day last week, and he said, "What's happening with the PPOs?" And I said, "Brilliant." He said, "The fact that you don't know, nobody's coming to you, it's a good sign." So we've settled down a lot, and people are working better as a team.
That's brilliant. Well, listen, give them all my regards, because they do a fantastic job in tough circumstances, and wherever we as ward councillors can support them, I'll always do my utmost, because I've always had a good rapport with them, and they've always delivered every time I asked them. So I can't thank them enough, and so please relay my thanks to them, please.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Councillor Atwell. Really do appreciate it, and they do, more importantly.
Thanks, Andy. Can you just clarify for me with regard to the vacancies? Because you said we've got 17, and there was 3 vacancies, and then there was another 2. Is that included in the 3 that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it might be 4 now, Paul.
It's 4. Okay, mate, no worries. So I've got 4 vacancies.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. At the moment, where's the funding going to come from for the PPOs now? Because it wasn't necessarily in the budgets or anything, and clearly we had they were supposed to generate their own income to fund themselves, basically. Now that seems to have been knocked on the head. Whereabouts is the budget's going to come from, and that, because obviously there was a set budget at the financial year, and that's now going to have a major impact on the budget.
Yeah. Is that something you want to comment on, Tracy?
Yeah, happy to. So, I mean, the team will be funded through a variety of sources. So we have a contribution from Derby Homes, a significant contribution into the service. We have obviously a core funding in terms of the council's budgets, and then what was in the original funding strategy was I suppose a forecast degree of income from various enforcement activities, which is always going to be, could only ever be an estimate, or a guesstimate, quite honestly, because you couldn't be sure exactly how many tickets you'd end up issuing and under what circumstances, because clearly those staff can't be driven by issuing a certain number of tickets. We need to enforce in an appropriate way, and as Andy's already talked about, we have a different sort of stage to post. It's about educating, it's about engaging, and then enforcement in many cases is the last resort. So in terms of what happens to the future, in many ways, we haven't had this service at this scale operating for a full year, and you haven't had them operating in a normal year now. So it's very difficult, I think, this year to be able to properly predict really what level of income you could expect from a proportionate and balanced approach to enforcement. Now, I know that doesn't quite answer your question, because I can't be categoric, but I don't think anybody could be, quite honestly. We'll know better when we get towards the end of this year, and as we both move into our sort of normal budget processes, we'll know a little bit better about how we stand. But to some extent, the year of COVID has thrown everything out of balance as well. So, I mean, there isn't a specific answer because this is something that will have to be taken into account as the council starts to formulate its budget options later in the year. What I would say, though, is the discussions that I've been having with Councillor Smale, it's been made very clear to me that there's a significant commitment to delivery of the kind of outcomes that this service was envisaged for this service area right at the outset. So the members are certainly committed to delivering on those promises.
Yeah, it's slightly worrying, though, that we've got a service up and running and we don't know how much it's going to cost us at the end of this current municipal year.
It's a concern, but it's nobody would be able to do that in this current year. This is, to use the U word, unprecedented, isn't it?
All right, okay, fine, thanks. Jerry, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just, I know you've gone on to the monetary side. It was just to give Andy and his team a bit of praise, to be quite honest. Last week, we had the usual going back to school and the school parking at one of the schools in Chaddesden. Got hold of the PPOs through email. They went down there, and your words, Andy, engage and educate. I had an absolutely fantastic email back from the head teacher at the school saying how good the PPOs were. And the residents as well come back to me as well. There's one or two residents who complained. That's why I got the PPOs down there. The residents have said how good the PPOs were, and the head teacher has as well, how good they were with the parents that were doing the parking. Weren't heavy-handed at all. It was engage, educate, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that they have learned something as well. So it's just again, pat on the back to you, Andy, on that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Councillor Pearce.
Thanks,
No
Jerry. Richard, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Andy, you've alluded to what could possibly happen over the next few months. Last Thursday, I've had a meeting with the local people who actually helped with the response in the Derwent ward during that lockdown. Yeah. And I know today somebody has been ringing through the lists of volunteers at the hub, trying to figure out how many volunteers we would have this winter to call on if we actually needed to. Has anybody formally spoke to yourself?
Go on, Tracy.
Hey, sorry, yeah, do you mean from that hub setup? Or in terms of how we might respond and be able to support that activity?
I've caught wind today only because somebody who's had a phone call from the hub. It's obvious that somebody's going through the volunteer list and other people who helped, trying to figure out if we could actually just kickstart what was there before if we needed to. Have they formally spoke to you?
Okay, so what we have set up within the council is an outbreak control group. So that is made up of members of the public health team, including Robin Jewis, Wayne Harrison, food and safety team, Doug Walkman. We've got comms in there. We've got Cole Tring Willis. We've got community. We've got corporate health and safety. We've got Jane Witherow. So we are basically working together, if you like. Setting up the council's response and responding at the same time. But one of the issues we were talking about today, actually in today's meeting, was actually, what have we learned from our previous experience, but also when and how do we set up and stand up those sorts of arrangements. And so we are actively working that collectively as a team.
So there is the communication there.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ajit, you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one, going back to the question you asked, for yourself, Tracy. Obviously, I think it's a bit too early at the moment to be asking regarding the costing and the revenue one. So if we can have a report or something about probably the new year, I think we've got a meeting up in January or February, so it gives us a bit of an idea of where we are with it. Would you be able to do that for us?
I'm sure we'll be able to provide more detail at that point.
Just gives everybody a bit of length of time, so obviously we can get, because obviously realistically with everything that's going on and with the uncertainty of what's going to happen in the next few weeks, it'd be pointless wasting everybody's time and officers' time into looking at it right now. I think realistically after Christmas we'll have a bit more of a better idea, so we can try and get some costs and some figures and to move forward, if that's okay.
Yep, I have no qualms about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Jonathan, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank for the opportunity. I know you invited me to these communities scrutiny meetings, and I do appreciate that. But obviously, as portfolio holder, it's great to just see the insight of the conversations that are going ahead. But this is more of a personal invite for a tasking meeting that the PPOs host quite regularly this Wednesday at midday. If there's any councillors that want to come down to Stores Road and get involved, a bit of what their briefings are like, what kind of work they do. I mean, Ajit, I know you got such a great relationship with the PPOs. You do a lot of work outdoor in your ward anyway, in that respect. But there is an opportunity for councillors to come down this Wednesday at midday, and then I'm sure Andy could also invite members of the Scrutiny to come down on other dates in future, if that's all right, Andy.
Yeah, we have daily tasking as well. It sounds like overkill, but it's getting it right, and we might reduce that as we get better and slicker. But we have 9 o'clock Monday to Friday every day PPO tasking. So anybody, as Councillor Smale said, more than happy, come down, issues in your ward, find out what's happening across the city, and then on the Wednesday, it's not all the PPOs, it's me, Sharon, Derby Homes, Police, Parks, different partners.
Okay. So with the current 6 and this, that and the other, are we going to be okay to do that?
Doesn't count in the work environment, I understand.
Sorry?
Doesn't count in the work environment.
I just wanted to make sure that we're all right.
We use the training room. We use the training room at Stores Road. That we've got a meter.
Bring your beer, shall you be okay?
We've got a meter apart. So
socially distance and masks, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody got any further questions? Okay, then I've got a couple of recommendations then. One is to review the financial impact in the new year. Andy's going to review the fines issues for us and let us have that.
Some more detail to that, yeah.
Yes, please. And then the other issue we've got is what is the legal position with regard to the PPOs at the minute, because of the shall we say, I know they're going to go on to training from what you've said for initially the enforcement notices regards parking or whatever the case may be. So what are the legal positions on that? That would be nice if you could let us know that in the near future, Andy, if that's all sorted.
We've got a meeting with cabinet with John tomorrow with Tracy and Parking Services. So we've had some legal advice recently, and it's positive. So I think we're back on track with that. Then I'm meeting. I'm catching up with Rob Shoebridge, Head of Parking Services, on Wednesday. And then we'll put a note together for John around future direction, how we can work together, the PPOs and parking services better, and what the powers are, so we're all clear. So I think once John's got that briefing note, John might want to circulate that to the board, but I'll leave that's a decision for John.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm going to say pass on my thanks to the PPOs, because they do a good job. As soon as you put a notice out or send them an email, they respond very quickly. I can say that from Mackworth, and because they do. And they're always round and about. It's nice to see them. In fact, we see more of them than we do the PCSOs and that. So it is a positive step. But if you could just look at the recommendations for us, I'd much appreciate it, and let us have that for the next meeting or whenever you can get them together, please.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, can I get an invite sent to Andy for 12 o'clock on Wednesday? I'd like to be present at that briefing, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Ajit. Yeah, we'll expect you there.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
I should probably join you as well, Ajit. So,
I think we've got 4 members in turn, so it gives you a bit of an insight. I mean, I've been to a few of them when I've been out tasking with them, but it is interesting, and it gives you an insight actually what they get to behind closed doors and what kind of mantra they're going to face when they're out there. So I would urge everybody, it is interesting, it is difficult what they do, and I think right about now they need our support more than anything else, because at the end of the day, let's not forget, they are working as for when we ask them to do some of the most daftest and difficult jobs that no normal person would do. So I think it's always good to have an insight and just let them know that, you know what, we understand what you do and we are there to support you.
Yeah, completely, no problems at all. Thank you very much anyway for attending that, Andy and Tracy. Absolutely, and you, Jonathan. Thank you. So we're moving on now to the work programme. Dom, have you got the work programme in front of you? Because I can't read it on my screen.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm just
Sorry.
just sharing it now.
Thank you.
Just getting to the bottom of this. Here we are. So for the next meeting on Monday, the 23rd of November, we've got a Public Protections Officer report.
Come back.
We've got contributions of leisure, culture and tourism to economic recovery. And we have an update on developments for football facilities.
Yeah.
And then
we're looking at the work programme for 2021.
Yeah, the meeting on Monday, the 25th of January, at the moment we've got one item for that. It's the Moorway Sports Village.
Yeah.
That item.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got anything they would like to add to the agenda or anything else?
No, I think we've covered just about everything, this Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. In that case then, if everybody's happy, I'd like to say thank you to you all for attending, and I'll see you on the, was it the 24th of next month, is it?
Yeah. Hopefully see you Wednesday, Chair.
The 23rd.
23rd. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. God bless.